Greetings and salutations, everyone. I do hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to today's upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Okay, so today's upload and experience was shared with me by a gentleman named Russ, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to talk with him and meet him. A couple of years ago, he was diagnosed with stage 2 pancreatic cancer. He now has stage 4, and his outlook for survival is not high at all. Now, he had found my channel through Stephen Quayle's website, which is pretty funny to me because I have received emails and in comments, people have told me that, they found this channel because of Stephen Quayle's website. I didn't even know about him, Stephen Quayle, sharing any of my videos until a live stream when a gentleman shared it with me, and I was really caught off guard. So he really started to find YouTube channels after he listened to Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and started listening to Phil Schrader and other people like that. Then realized, whoa, YouTube has a lot of channels that are sources of information. And through Stephen Quayle's amazing website, he also, Russ, has bought in numerous amounts of precious metals, silver, gold. And I guess Stephen Quayle trades in that and sells that. I guess there's a store involved with his website as well, which I wasn't really familiar with. But really nice guy. I'm super glad that we talked. He was a sheriff's deputy, and he believes that he has cancer because of things that he was exposed to throughout his years as a sheriff's deputy. The experience that I'm going to share with you guys today is when he worked for a little county in New Mexico called Lincoln County, New Mexico. And he worked there for a couple years, not really like he bounced around counties in New Mexico. And so he bounced around to 4 different counties, but Lincoln was the one that he has the most experiences with. Things that he saw the most were in that county. Now, I guess he had seen quite a few UAPs and such. And it's interesting because we were talking and he agreed with my views, a couple of my views on certain things. Like, I believe that there is a 5-state East Coast hotspot. I believe that there's 5 states on the East Coast, and that from there, these creatures kind of travel sporadically up, through, and down. And then there are other little hotspots throughout our country. I also have a theory that New Mexico and Colorado have a really overwhelming amount of high strangeness events that happen there. And I think that there's something definitely going on underneath the state of New Mexico, whether it be multiple deep underground military bases. And we shouldn't even put military in that anagram, DUMBs. It should just be deep underground bases. But, because the military and the alien agenda, alien races have really joined forces. Actually, not really. The aliens and those reptilians, the grays, they've just taken advantage of these agreements that our government had given them. But he agreed with me on that because of the things that he has seen in New Mexico throughout his years as law enforcement. Countless amount of UFOs. And I know some people say, well, the proper terminology now is UAP. Well, no, it was when it was unidentified aerial phenomena, but now they changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomena. So I'll still call it UFOs. Now, multiple. He said there was one night that he had recalled being in northern New Mexico where just he and another deputy had met up and they were just shooting the shit, parked off to the side of the road and watching. They were doing a speed trap, actually. And they had counted at least 5 to 6 different objects that were flying through the skies that didn't resemble satellites and didn't resemble anything other than their movements were just kind of zigzagged, scattered, shooting, everywhere. Now, the experience that I'm going to share right now occurred in 2006. And he specifically said, I don't give a shit. Use my real name. They're going to know it was me anyway. Because I was one of the few law enforcement that had gone up into that area that day. I was one of probably the only person that was told to pull back. And I was the one person that did share with my higher ups, the sheriff and other people in the law enforcement community in that region, the things that I saw. He said, I even wrote our governor about what I saw, questioning, and never got a response. He said, I got threatened by my higher ups, but, he said, so I don't give a shit. I'm dying. I don't care. I don't care. And, I really feel fortunate to talk to him because to me, he's a hero. It is definitely sad. You could tell, you could hear the tiredness in this man's voice. And it was very great conversation, but heartbreaking all in one. So 2006, it was a October 9th, chilly morning. He had just come back from a couple days off. He was working midnights previous, and now he's working morning days. So he's at the station, and they receive a telephone call from a local person who had been walking their dog in an area called West Mountain. And that is part of the Captain Mountains, which is in the town of Captain, which falls in Lincoln County. Now, to paint the picture for you what this mountain and the terrain is, it is a very beautiful, a lot of pine, and back in that time, there were not a lot of roads up there. And the roads that were up there were dirt. They were graded dirt and rubbled rock roads, 1-lane roads. So we're not talking major traffic going through these roads. There's very, very little traffic, if not any, during days, especially in October. And this person's up there walking their dog, like I guess they've done all the time. And they call and they state that, you know, they had been up there and they had left very quickly because they had, as they were up there, they had seen 2 large military-like convoy trucks and a couple of large SUVs, and that it looked like something was going on, and, you know, possibly some people are up to no good, because these didn't look like regular soldiers. He looks at, you know, he looks at the paperwork and stuff and to see if there's any kind of notification that if there's going to be any kind of military exercises in that region. There was none. You know, I mean, this is like a random, desolate place. And he's like, what in the hell? He lets a couple of the other deputies say, hey, you know, I'm going to check this call out. It's kind of sounds a little weird to me. And, you know, lets everyone know what's going on. That couple deputies that were on shift, and there was 2. So he drives up, and it's about 10 a.m., still a little chilly, but starting to warm up a little bit. Not hot, but not ice cold either. And so, sorry about the quick pause there. It's literally 12:30 at night, and people walk down my street with those little speakers playing their garbage music. Now, it's starting to, you know, the sun is starting to kind of warm the cold off. And he decides, you know, I'm going to check it out. And he drives out. You know, he had been on the job for about 15 years at this point. So, you know, he's not been with this county for 15 years, but on the job. So he's seen some shit. He knows how things work. He's not some rookie. You know, he's got time under his belt. He's dealt with people, and he knows, you know, what is what and what is really off. Well, he drives up into there, and as he's pulling up, there's a couple of sharp turns, and once again, this is graded dirt roads, but they're not like maintained all the time. You know, maybe twice a year, the town goes up and grades them so people can drive up there, and then throughout the rest of the year, people rip them up, or, water damage, whatever. So there's not a lot of traffic, and he pulls up, and he sees these two military kind of convoy trucks, and he's looking at them, and they are military. They are clearly U.S. government trucks. The plates are U.S. government, but these are kind of modified. They aren't those. They are and aren't the military trucks that carry troops or carry supplies, because it looks like these are reinforced kind of boxes on the back of them. They're just, metal, and not what you normally see. And he's first thing that's what he sees. His first thing he sees, and he's like, what in the hell is going on here? And they're parked up on this little ridge, and he sees there's a total of 3 large black SUVs. And they're parked, 2 are parked in front of these cargo trucks, and 1 is parked behind. And he parks, and he's looking at everything, and there are men, soldiers, we'll say soldiers, because they weren't in their regular camo fatigues. These guys were in, and they were military. He said these guys were no doubt military. The way they moved, they were precision. You could tell that there was a pecking order, and it was, this was not something I or anyone else was supposed to see, and you could tell that these people were pissed. He said from the count that he got real quick, with each SUV, he assumed maybe 5 to 6 guys. And then the 2 trucks, there would have been 2 in each of those. And these were all geared up in black fatigues, black shirts, not t-shirts, but blacked out, fatigue like, but not camo shirts, military boots, black. And they had rifles. They had M4s, and, they were spread out in this area, some standing in front of the trucks, some standing by the trucks. And then he notices he's assessing the situation that is in front of him. And he sees immediately 2 men that don't fit into the scenario of what he's looking at. And they are two men that are in suits, black suits, and they are intimidating. He said the one guy that was walking, as he's assessing the situation, he sees one of the suits go over to the front of one of the cargo trucks and starts to talk to one of the soldiers. And he could see that they were talking about him because he had pointed towards my vehicle. And the kind of stature of that soldier and all the rest of them now really changed. They were pretty much on alert at this point. And, there's 20 guys or so with M4 rifles and me. He said, I'm a little nervous. Even though they have government plates, I'm now kind of questioning, should I have come up here? and I see this guy walking toward me, and he's walking like he is on a mission. And he said, you could tell. You could just tell as this guy is walking towards me. He said, I'm looking at this guy, and he is big. He is physically intimidating, and he looks like he has killed before. That's his exact word. This guy looked like he has killed before. And he walks right up to the sheriff's deputy's car, Russ's car. Russ gets out of the car and meets him. And the guy just says, you might want to contact your sheriff because we already have, and that's what's going on right now. And you probably should just turn around and leave. Suggestions, but in a threatening manner. And Russ is not that person. I'm not that fucking guy. He said, who the hell are you? And until I get notification that I'm supposed to get the hell out of here, I want your info. I want to know who you are. He said, I see government plates. He goes, how do I know you didn't steal these things? And these are your buddies dressed up here, and you guys aren't, you guys are smuggling people, smuggling drugs. I want to know, I want to know what's going on. So, I tell him, I want to know who you are, flat out, who you are, what you're up here. Once I get my call, I'll leave. I'm not calling them. I'm not calling my station. They're going to call me. If you said you called them, why wasn't I notified prior to me receiving a phone call letting me know that you were all up here? That, and I'm not, he goes, I'm not turning my back on you either. He goes, I want some identification. I want to know who you are. And the guy literally very aggressively, so much so that Russ did put his hand on his service pistol because he thought this guy was going in for, and as he backed up to quick pull his pistol, this guy is reaching into his suit jacket, pulling his credentials. Russ doesn't know what he's pulling. He does this, and he watches a couple of those soldiers quickly train up on him. He pulls out his badge, and he doesn't remember the guy's first name. He remembers the guy's last name, and he said, I'll never forget it. He said it was LaBarge, and it was Department of Homeland Security. He said, this asshole was from Department of Homeland Security, Jeff. He said, there was his badge and his frickin' ID card. And he said, all right, well, what's going on? What are you doing up here? And he said, that's none of your concern. He said, I outrank you. This is, we're on federal business. As of right now, you might as well just get in your vehicle, turn around, contact your boss, and drive out of here. Because what we're doing here doesn't concern you. We're going to send some guys down to the main access road. We're going to shut this road off. No one, we apologize. He was actually, his demeanor kind of changed, but he was still very aggressive. This guy was not at any one point. He was very dismissive, and he was very authoritative. But it did change. His demeanor did change a little. It softened up just a little, but still enough that, Russ was on edge. Russ sees the ID, sees what's going on. he at this point realizes, well, and thinks to himself, all right, this guy did show me his credentials. He's all thinking this in his head real quick. He's like, these soldiers could just shoot me down, create some bullshit story that I drew on them, and they had no other choice but to shoot me. And, who's going to believe a dead county sheriff deputy over Department of Homeland Security and what appears to be United States military? And to this day, he doesn't know, and he's pondered this for a long time, what branch or what kind of teams these guys were in, because these guys were, when he stepped back to put his hand in and possibly have to pull out his pistol, these guys had their M4 rifles trained on him. Like, when he backed up, they were up, protecting their person in command at that point. As he's thinking all this real quick, trying to think of how to handle the situation, he hears this radio, and he gets a command. We were informed that, there's going to be some federal guys up there with some military, and you're told to, stand down, come back down, and do your patrols for the day, do your business, but you are to leave that location now. No questions asked. Get in your fucking cruiser and leave. And he's not... There's just something off about this, he says, in his head. And he's just, why wasn't there notification? Why didn't anyone know about this? Because if at least we had been notified, we could have secured that area. That person wouldn't have been up walking their dog in that area. And, there wouldn't have been any kind of misunderstandings. Why are we just now finding out about this? And he gets into his cruiser. He doesn't say a word to this guy. It's more or less, he's pissed. Russ was pissed because he's doing his job, but the way that he was treated didn't go over with him. And he said, I'm not one of those cops that, I wasn't one of those cops that used my badge to measure my dick. He said, and that was his exact words, and he said, I literally, if you were cool with me, I was cool with you. If you were honest with me, I was honest with you. He said, there was a few things that I did not tolerate. He said, one was drinking and driving. He said, I had no any kind of toleration for that. But if you were just, in a location, in a spot, or doing something that you weren't supposed to do, and you had a reasonable explanation, or, you were just dicking around doing something dumb, and you told me the truth, and you gave me a good, and I felt it was the truth, I'd let you go. I'd say, hey, don't do it again. Or, even if it was something, he said, kids, racing around doing, dumb shit. As long as they were going to be safe and not hurt anyone else, if they were in an area, I was a kid at one point too. I didn't become a law enforcement officer to bust balls. I became a law enforcement officer because, one, I love serving my community. He said, and two, there needs to be laws enforced. And, so he leaves. He unwillingly, to his own leaves. And he gets on the radio and he is talking to his sheriff and he's like, listen, there is something going on up here. Why weren't we informed? Why did we just find? Why we wouldn't have known they were even here if that one person walking their dog didn't notify us. And you wouldn't even gotten a call if that person walking their dog didn't notify us and I didn't come up there. We wouldn't have known. But what if there was some teenagers driving up there and, these guys were real, sketched and I could see an accident something going wrong. And that was his, these guys were not playing around. And some local goes up there or someone that's just going hiking or whatever goes up there and, stumbles on something or does something that makes these guys a little uneasy. We might have a death. So, what the hell is going on? And the sheriff doesn't have a reasonable explanation. He's pretty much in the dark as well. Just pull out, let's go. Get out of there. And he does. And he stews about it. For a couple of hours, he's stewing. And as he's stewing throughout the day, a couple hours, not the whole day, he thinks about there's an old access road that goes out that way. He said, I want to see what these guys are doing. Just for some reason, he just, he said, something was off. Something was telling me, these guys weren't up there just to, randomly. Why do you need that many men with that kind of firepower in a small area of Lincoln County, New Mexico? And where the hell did they come from? And who and what, where's black kind of fatigued, not camo, but fatigues? Who the hell wears that kind of uniform? So he goes up and he takes this access road, and it's not a graded access road. It's an unmaintained for many years. And he said, I had to, get out of my cruiser, and I walked about 20 minutes out and got to this little kind of knolled area where I could see what was going on. He said, I brought my binoculars with me. He said, I had my long rifle with me, and I had my service pistol, and I brought my binoculars, and I sat there, and he said, I only brought a long rifle in case something was off, and I really had to, he said, I would have radioed it in, but just something was off. Even though he showed me his credentials, we got a call. He said, so I'm watching them, and they're all kind of standing back, and the two suits have now, when he now sees it, the two SUVs that were kind of in front of the two convoy trucks are now turned around and facing the road out. They are now parked and ready to go. Turned around. The other SUV is parked exactly where it was. And he believes that was the one for the suits. And the two convoy trucks are up a little further, and their ass ends are backed in to an area where there's more thick kind of pine out there. These just huge kind of pine trees. And it's not real dense there, but it's pretty dense. And he's like, huh, what the hell? And the suits are talking, and he sees one of the soldiers go over to the SUV that's kind of parked the way it was before. And he gets in it and lines it up behind the other two. The two are side by side. They can't drive down that road side by side, but they are side by side where they're parked. The other SUVs behind it. And how the caravan or the cargo trucks are parked. They are almost parked to where, they can just turn and pull out and follow that whole kind of caravan out, and he's confused. He's like, what? It doesn't look like there's been any kind of exercise done or what. And it doesn't make sense. Nothing is making sense to him. What are they teaching him how to drive in rough mountainous conditions? Probably not. What the hell do they have these, cargo van trucks for? These cargo trucks. And why are these trucks look like they are hauling something that they don't want something to get out or something to get in? He said they were the military cargo trucks that you would see with, troop transport or supply transports with the kind of canvas top. But they didn't have canvas tops on them. They had a modified box on the back of both of them. And he sees real quick the suit LaBarge guy, and he is an intimidating figure. He runs up to those trucks, and behind him, all of the other soldiers are behind him, and they're all standing in a row. They've all got their M4s up, ready to, quickly pull up and shoot if they have to, train it on whatever. He watches. Initially, the first suit was in front of everyone. He talks to one of the soldiers that is on the side of the truck, and he gets behind this line of black clothing, black uniformed soldiers. He gets behind them. He said, and I watched the other two guys go behind the truck. He said, I heard, this kind of yell. I don't know what they said. It was a vocalization. They said something. And as they said whatever they said, I couldn't hear because I'm a good clip away and I'm looking at this through my binoculars. He said, I see those soldiers quickly raise up their rifles and train them on the back where those two other soldiers went, on the back of those trucks. He's like, are they going to shoot? Are they going to shoot those soldiers? Do they have, and he's starting now think of all these possibilities. Do they have, criminals? Are they have, some high profiled criminal, or do they have whatever in the back of this truck, and they're going to shoot him? And he sees the two guys run rapidly back to where, and these guys are unarmed. They do have a holster pistol on their side, but they don't have a rifle. These two guys that just came from behind the trucks, they run and they get behind the kind of wall of soldiers with their rifles pointed. And they're all standing there waiting and looking. And he's training, he's trying to scan through.
off to the side here. He can't see that good in front of this wall of soldiers. Can't see that side, but he can see this side because of where he's angled. So he's got a better view at the farthest cargo truck. And he can see into the woods. And he said, I'm watching and I'm waiting. And all of a sudden, he said, I see the truck kind of move, like someone's getting out of it or something's getting out of it. And he said, then maybe I kind of, what if it's like a training exercise? What if they've got like a kind of UTV or something in the back? Because this thing moved. Like there was some weight to it. And he said, what I saw changed my views on everything that I thought our government stood for. He said, I saw a werewolf-like creature in its ass end, like it had just come out of that back of that truck. He said it had a long tail, and it was just absolutely massive in size. It was on all fours, and it was just real long. He said it was this kind of honey-colored brown. All of it. And he said, you know, judging from size, I'm looking at the size of it, and I'm comparing it to the tires on the truck, and this and that. He said this thing had to be 4.5 feet at shoulders. He said it runs into the woods. Runs into the pines just a little ways. And I lose sight of it. But then I see the other van, the other kind of jostle a little bit, and I see another one of these things, and it runs out towards where the other one had just ran. He said, but that one stops. He said, that one is what appeared to be from my distance a little bigger than the first kind of honey brown colored one. He said, that one was jet black. Jet black. So I scanned over to see what the guys were doing. And they're all got their rifles trained on that area. He said those two suits aren't doing nothing. They're just standing behind observing the situation. He said that fucking thing stood up. He said, I'm thinking, you know, are these some kind of lab-grown wolves that they're reintroducing, you know, to the population? Are they going to, you know, hunt the overpopulation of animals that we have in our area? You know, what are these things for? And then it stands up. He said, and it was, Jesus, it was huge. He said, and it crouched down and it let out this howl. And it was so ear-piercing. It was so loud. And he said, I'm watching everything. And he said, it just shoots into the woods. And it's gone. He said, I look at these, you know, I scan back over. And I watch everything. He goes, you got the two other guys. He goes, they pulled those cargo trucks up almost behind that third SUV. And I'm watching the soldiers, and they're looking. He said the suit's kind of looking through the woods, and he's on what looked to be a sat phone to whoever, and they all kind of pile into their vehicles, and they just disperse real quick. He waits a little bit. He watches the trucks and the SUVs leave the area, and he waited about 20-30 minutes on this kind of knolled area where he's looking at the whole area, scanning, trying to see what exactly, because he is thinking, did I hallucinate this? And was I so pissed off by what happened that I hallucinated this? You know, because wolves don't stand up on their hind legs. And the military or Department of Homeland Security don't transport wolves. So he waits, he gets up, and he starts walking that distance back to his cruiser. He turns it around and heads out. And he goes right back to that main dirt road up into West Mountain area. Well, he gets to that exact location where everything just happened. And he gets out and he's looking at tracks. He's looking at the car tracks. And, you know, he can see boot prints and such. And he takes a walk over up into this kind of little hilled area where the two cargo trucks were backed up into. And he starts looking on the ground for tracks. And what he sees is sets of large, what appeared to be canine-like paw prints. He said, but what was weird was the backs were very canine-like. He said, but the fronts almost looked like they had fingers. And there were, you know, a good-sized hand. Probably double the size of his hand, he said. And he's 6'2". So he's got probably a pretty good-sized hand. He said he did, but I don't know. He's kind of off now. He's like, what in God's name? And he gets into his cruiser and he's going to call it in and try and figure out, hey, you know, I got a bad feeling and I went back up there. Everyone's gone now. Did you know they were heading out? Were you notified of what happened? Because I'm back up there. And he decides against that real quick, because as he's in his cruiser, he's sitting there thinking, he's got his, you know, he's staring down at his steering wheel. He said maybe 30 seconds, maybe a little longer. He said, I'm pissed and I'm confused and I don't know what these guys were doing. I don't know what these things were. And as he's, you know, thinking about everything, he kind of lifts his head up and he stretches his neck. He said, I'll never forget. He goes, I stretched my neck up. He said, and I put my head down, eye height to the windows, to my front window, and I scan right over back to where I had just been. He said, and right there was that honey-colored brown and that jet black Dogman. He said, I said werewolves back in the day. He said they were staring right at my car. They were just staring. And he said, he said they were on both their back legs. He goes, I put it in reverse. He said, I turned the wheel as fast as I could and I shot out of there. Half expecting those things to be running after him. He said, but as I'm pulling out and going down this dirt road, he said, I see him go back into the woods. He said that both just dropped onto all fours and shot into the woods. He drives down the hill, and from the time the two suits and the soldiers left to right now, where he's driving down the dirt road to get back to the main road, was about an hour an hour and 15 minutes. Not that long, but long enough. And as he's getting to the bottom of the hill, he sees one of those SUVs parked, facing him. It's parked in the middle of the road. It's right there. And he's coming down that hill, and he stops, and they're nose to nose. And that suit that looked like he killed people before gets out of that SUV and walks right up to my car. And he taps on my window, and he shows me his credentials again. He shows me his Department of Homeland Security badge. He shows me all his credentials. And he says to him, he said, listen, he said, I don't know why you came back. He said, I don't know what you think you saw up there. He said, but you didn't see shit up there. He said, and I would just keep your trap shut. He said, because we notified your sheriff that we were here. We notified him when, we pulled out of here. We also let them know that you're up here. And he just puts his hand, he's like, listen, I don't want any problem, He said, I was just curious of what you guys were doing. He said, I wanted to check and see if you're all gone. He said, I didn't see anything. He just, I saw you guys up here. And that suit is staring him, dead eyes. And he said, you better be telling the truth. He said, because some bad things happen to people that, lie. And he gets in his SUV, backs out, and drives away. He drives back to the station, and nobody says a word to him. His sheriff doesn't say a word to him. The two other deputies that are just sitting at their desks smoozing, doing nothing. He walks into the sheriff's office and quickly closes the door. And he looks down, and there's the suit sitting in his boss's office. Is that suit? And he's got a glass in his hand, and it's the sheriff's whiskey that he keeps in his office, and he's sipping it, and he looks up. He said he looks up at me, and he gives me this kind of fuck you shitty eating grin, like, haha, I got one on you. He said, and at that point, I knew I didn't have a leg to stand on. What am I going to tell my sheriff that? I just saw these trucks dump 2 werewolves into the woods of West Mountain. So Russ is standing there, knowing that he's got nothing to say. He just shut the door. So that LaBarge guy knows that, obviously he knows, and everyone that was in that office, that sheriff and that LaBarge guy knows he was going to say something. Why else are you going to go in your boss's office and shut the door behind you? Gets up, he walks out. And he's got about, not much longer left on his shift for the day. He does a quick kind of patrol, comes back, and nobody's saying a word to him again. And he's just like, what in the hell? And he realizes that the guy's no longer there. Because when he pulled out and left, you could see that SUV, government plates. And he pulls back in, and there's nothing there. So obviously he's gone. No one's saying a word to him. And 3 years go by. So 2010, and he leaves Lincoln County. He said, but those couple of years after what occurred, he said it was almost like no one trusted me. He said it was like I had like a mark on my back, a target on me that said no one trusts this guy. fellow co-workers, other deputies, no one. Sheriff wouldn't even barely acknowledge him on occasions. And he said that was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. He said, and once I heard you say about Corey Godzi, when I did an interview with a gentleman that was friends with Corey Godzi, and that's that young boy, the 13-year-old boy that was dragged up a large inclined hill. I think it was 1,200 feet or something like that. It was a good clip of that. Homeland Security was there. He said, then I hear you talking about Victor. I've heard some of Victor's interviews where he talks about these chipped creatures that we let go. At that point, I knew I saw something I shouldn't have. And these things, our government is using these things for whatever they want them. Whatever they want to use these things for, they do. And he's 100% convinced that he will, to the day he takes his last breath, never trust the government again after what he saw. And why would he? Why would he? What did they drop? Why did they release 2 Dogmen into a remote, not very large mountain system? What's the purpose? He will never know, but he will also never trust the government from that day forth. Nor his sheriff, nor any other sheriff he worked for after that, which was 1. So, Russ, thank you for sharing that with us. You are in my prayers. I hope I did your experience justice. And it was a pleasure getting to know you.
Have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.